Welcome back to DM Workshop, Building a Social Encounter, Part 2 of Making a Masquerade Ball. If you haven't seen Part 1, check it out before you come here. Otherwise, nothing will make sense. There's a chance that nothing will make sense anyway, even if you have seen Part 1, but probabilities. So we've got the NPCs and the tension points in place. How do we execute? This is the hardest part because you can prepare virtually anything and everything when it comes to the backstories of the NPCs and other creative ideas behind them. But execution involves many more unknowns. Let me show you how I do it. By the way, I rolled all my dice randomly in the course of this to set this up, so I couldn't predict where the players in this case would go. But I cut all that out so you wouldn't have to wait for me to pause, roll a dice, and process what's going on. Now, when we start things off, the tension begins at basically a 0, for the players at least, because they don't know who's here. The characters are here to have fun, unwind. As I'd mentioned before in the last video, I would have the players make perception checks, and I want all of them to decide where they would like to go in secret. Because in effect, each character's turn is happening at the same time, much like how in combat and initiative, even though I'm going through each player one turn at a time, the information that's being received on each player's turn is not information that all the characters would have. Now from here, I'm going to label each of the tables 1 through 4. First, this is the one with the romantic interest with Bruce. So let's call this person Bruce's Bay. Bruce's Bay goes up to table 4 with Kathleen, Steve, and Harriet. He rolls a 19 on perception. Pretty good. Immediately notices someone, Kathleen. Kathleen, wearing a long flowing green dress with a mask to match, shoots him a dirty look. And this is a look that he would recognize anywhere. And because of this history, she's gonna be the first person to recognize him, to call him out. And with their history, she's not gonna be nice. Maybe polite because it's a party, but not nice. Oh, are you here to do catering? Now the player is likely going to respond in kind. And by that I mean not kind at all. If they do that, I'm inclined to have them make a roll, depending on their objective. If they're here to show off, I might have them do a performance. If they want Kathleen to shut up, I'd ask for an intimidation, a persuasion, maybe a deception, depending on what tactic they're taking. In this moment, they roll the dice. And in this case, unfortunately, the number's low. So the player is expecting failure now. So I'll make a note and leave them on a cliffhanger. This builds tension because the player expects something bad to happen, but it doesn't happen immediately. And also, as a DM, this gives you time to think of a great response. Now let's go to the next person, the performer. The performer is gonna go to the table with Vincent, Candace, and Cassie. Now, they rolled low on perception, so they have no idea who's who at the moment. As the performer, they're inclined to schmooze and talk themselves up, maybe get people to come to their show. So in this case, I'll have the performer roll a little persuasion for me. They rolled super high. So they're pulling everyone in at the table. Candace, the one that's in league with the assassins, the attackers, she, as you know, has an ulterior motive, in which case you might have her bat her eyelashes a little bit. It might translate into, oh, that was a very high performance roll, but you know that there's something else behind there too. Now Cassie, the one who's a friend of an enemy, but not necessarily an enemy, might lean closer too. And so at this point, I might give just a little bit of a breadcrumb, a little reveal. Let's say that the enemy that she's connected to, that she's a friend of, has a characteristic star tattoo. As she leans into the performer as they're telling their tale or drawing them in with their charisma, the perception roll here, in this case, it's middle of the road. So I would probably tell the player as she leans in, you notice her sleeve drops a little bit. It looks like she's got a tattoo. You see two ends of what look like triangles. If it's not obvious enough to provoke a reaction, I might be a little more heavy-handed and say, it looks like part of a star. In either case, I'm trying to build the fear here. Because now we have a potential enemy of one of our characters in our midst. At that point, I might have Vincent chime in and say, is that you, performer? I should have known. You two are lucky to be in the midst of such a great hero, which should make the party a little bit nervous because they're aware, out of character, that there's a potential enemy here. Whereas Vincent, being completely oblivious, has just revealed the performer's identity to the table. Again, cliffhanger. Let's move on to the next person. Now we're going to the character who has that backstory of hating the enemy that has the star tattoo. And here, this is why I had everyone do those secret rolls, because if it wasn't all happening at once, if this was all sequential, then very likely this character would go right up to that person and ask them why. Why do you have this? Even though their character doesn't necessarily know that. Having those options chosen at the start in secret gives you the chance to play with the intrigue here. So no player has more information than the others, at the very least when they start to make their decisions. Back to the map, let's call her Star Destroyer. Now, she's decided to go to the table with the mayor. Mayor K, the major diplomatic relation, and the secret bad guy. Now I had her roll a perception, which she rolled quite high, as well as a follow-up history, which she rolled high as well, and she was able to identify that the major diplomatic relation, William, wields considerable influence and would likely be someone that the mayor would want to impress. She decides that she wants to schmooze, to try to get in a good word in case this important person might be helpful to the group. Of course, we know that the mayor's there, so they're going to be super happy that Star Destroyer's there. I have Drew here, a secret bad guy. His secret villainy is not tied into Star Destroyer. It's tied into Bruce's Bay, because Drew has Bruce's Bay's kidnapped brother. This is getting pretty convoluted. Just know Bruce's Bay is the one that would be after him. But we can start seeding some stuff here that the player of Bruce's Bay might pick up on, but not necessarily be able to act on it. It might not actually ever get to Bruce's Bay because it might not be important enough of a detail for Star Destroyer to pick up on. Let's say that the brother that's been kidnapped has a signature dish that's a stew that contains saffron. Now, saffron has a smell that's fairly strong, earthy, similar to hay or rubber. So I'm not gonna say saffron because that might be a little too on the nose. But I'll start with those hints when Star Destroyer approaches that group. And when she starts schmoozing with important William here, Drew might step in. Let's say that this secret bad guy has a certain amount of wealth too. So he might also be trying to make a good impression on William for his own status and potential business connections. So we have Star Destroyer trying to sway William while Drew is undercutting this for his own gain. Maybe something like, oh, I see. So you're one of those rough and tumble brutes who likes to play with a sword. Oh no, I think that's the perfect sort of person to handle an important trade route. And this is likely to trigger a more adversarial response from Star Destroyer. They might want to intimidate Drew. And this time, unfortunately, it's a low roll. But you want to keep them in suspense, so let's get on to the next one before they hear the reaction. Our final player, Renford's friend. Let's call this person Renfriend. Decides to go to the table with Renford, Bruce, and the rival performer. And this makes sense as this character knows Renford. So Renfriend is gonna arrive, Renford's gonna see him, and heartily shake his hand. Now, Renfriend might notice that, of course, Renford is happy to see him, but also seems focused on something else. Maybe it's because Renford hasn't seen the woman he loves in a while, which we've established before is the reason that there's tension between Renford and Vincent. Maybe Renford thinks Vincent has done something to her. So he's a little distant, but he'll greet Renfriend by name. At this point, you might have Renfriend make an insight check to see if he picks up the animosity, the murderous intent that Renford has towards Vincent. He rolled high. So Renfriend might see a level of anger, fury, not the kind that's boiling over so you lose control right now, but the type that's cold, calculating, methodical. It might be good to mention that Renford has a sword at his hip, especially if Renford typically doesn't arrive places armed. Now let's talk about Bruce. Bruce at this table, maybe he's only ever met one member of the party, Bruce's Bay. So he might not even know that Renfriend is one of the heroes. And you can create some drama here, either something positive or something negative. You can seed that Bruce is a fantastic guy by having Renfriend interact with him and he responds with charisma and charm. Or you can do the opposite. make Bruce out to be a terrible guy by showing him being aloof, superior than thou, someone who's clearly only nice to the person that he's lusting after. You choose. But we also have the rival performer here, Genevieve, who could easily jump in and say, you look like you're someone important. Do you happen to know how one could get an in with a theater owner? And it starts off fairly pleasantly, which could be a nice surprise, a nice change of pace. I love tense cliffhangers, but sometimes you gotta throw in a nice one so that your players never know what to expect. Now we're gonna jump back to Bruce's Bay, who just tried to shut up Kathleen and failed with a pretty low roll. We've had some time to think about this now, and you can choose how that failure presents itself. Remember that we always want to fail forward, so though it may be embarrassing, we're still finding out more things, creating more problems, more questions for us to eventually answer. So I would have this failure manifest in a spillage. Bruce's Bay accidentally, in the course of trying to one-up Kathleen, knocks over a wine glass, spilling it all over Steve, the owner of the general store. Steve is very gracious, very nice. It's okay, don't worry, I'll go clean it up in the restroom. At which point, I'd have Bruce's Bay roll a perception check. Unfortunately, it's low. What I was checking for was if he would notice Harriet, the investigator, specifically her reaction to this. Because people at a party, if they're fully engaged with the table, are likely to react very quickly, very strongly to something happening right before them, like wine being spilled. Now in this case, I would not have Harriet react very strongly because she's focused on someone else at another table. But with a low perception, Bruce's Bay doesn't notice this. Of course, I don't need to say that he doesn't see anything, but maybe he doesn't notice that on account of Kathleen looking triumphant and throwing another barb at him while he's down. Steve might leave now to get cleaned up. Kathleen, healing herself, might announce loudly to the room how clumsy Bruce's Bay is. If only he could handle a drink as well as his mace. Now, everyone in the room could infer, based on what she said, that Bruce's Bay is a hero too, which gives Candace, the inside person of the assassination, the assault, extra information. Now the player has to decide what they're gonna do right now. If they're gonna help Steve, if they're gonna try to get revenge on Kathleen, if they're gonna try to save face, or talk to Harriet here, who seems cool as a cucumber. Let's say that they're gonna try to save face. Maybe a quick apology, remark. With a pretty decent performance roll, that gets the people back on Bruce's Bay's side, though word is out. Bruce himself might come over to comfort Bruce's Bay, which makes sense. And you can have a little interaction there too. If Bruce's Bay is particularly affectionate in this moment, Candace, our inside assassin, might make note of that too. Now let's go back to our performer, been talked up by Vincent, and now is getting closer to Cassie, who the party out of character suspects as an enemy. Candace is likely interested in the conversation too, but has been looking around a bit more with the chaos unfolding around Bruce's Bay. So what's the performer gonna do here? Maybe noticing that portion of the star tattoo. Maybe they're gonna try to covertly get some more information about it, knowing that it's important to Star Destroyer. As a performer, they might make a persuasion roll and try to get everyone in on one of those get-to-know-you games. Try to get some answers. They rolled a natural 1. I love this game. With that natural 1, maybe performer suggests something like 2 truths, 1 lie, but completely flubs the explanation. He has to go back over it a few times, misremembering a different game, his cheeks are getting flushed, and people are starting to lose interest. It looks like Candace is turning away from him. Vincent excuses himself completely to go get an hors d'oeuvre. Cassie is no longer leaning towards him, and her initial interest changes into a look of pity. Big blow to our performer. Now here I might have him make a perception check to see what's going on around, so it's not just pure failure here. That was fairly middle of the road, so I'll give him a little tidbit. Might see that the woman across the room, which we would recognize as rival performer, seems to be smiling. Though from this distance, it's hard to tell what kind of smile it is. Back to Star Destroyer. Now she had a low roll trying to deal with Drew, so now we have the ramifications. Maybe Drew has the ear of William now. Mayor K is looking a little worried. What if Drew snatches up this trade relation from the mayor's grasp? I have her roll a perception check. It's decent, so she'd probably note that Vincent is here. Performer is struggling across the room. Bruce's bay caused a commotion with a spilled drink, and Renfriend seems to be the only one keeping his composure. What's she gonna do? So maybe now she tries to make an impassioned plea for the town. The mayor, recognizing what's happening, jumps in. So I'm trying to be nice. I give her advantage. She rolls a 3 twice. So clearly the dice have spoken. The two of them stumble, stammer, talk over each other, and actually end up pushing William farther away from considering the town for a potential trade relationship. Now, seeing so much failure so far, I would be willing to give Star Destroyer a little bit more information amidst this failure. Maybe she hears in the conversation between William and Drew that Drew is from the same town that Bruce's bay is from. Another seed for the secret bad guy arc. In this moment, she might decide to go get a drink to recover from this madness. Back to Renfriend. I'm gonna turn it up a notch now. Because Bruce has gone south to Bruce's bay, the path between Renford and Vincent is now clear. I would announce and roll an open perception check for Renford. I'd tell everyone what it's for. Renford is focused on trying to find Vincent. So Vincent, having gone up to go to the food table, Renford has a better chance of spotting him. I rolled decently. So in that case, I would have Renfriend notice that Renford is looking over to the food tables, focusing in, trying to see if that is in fact Vincent. In effect, though this does break a little bit of the reality here, I do want to give Renfriend an opportunity for a reaction here. If he wants to divert Renford from this collision path, he's got to do something. He's got to try something. If it's spilling a drink, spilling food, or drawing him in with a secret of some sort. In this case, Renfriend is going to try lying to Renford. I know where your love is. And that was an average roll. But I would give him the benefit of the doubt, I guess a lower DC, if you will, saying that Renford, not being totally in his right mind, might be swayed, might have his attention held for just a second. But I'd also have Genevieve chime in, snarkily. You could do with some acting lessons. And we'd see what the player reacts to this with. Maybe a quick, "You're not helping here," which with a decent persuasion roll could sway her to be an ally right now, because she is trying to get in with that theater owner. So maybe with Genevieve's help, Renfriend is able to get Renford's attention away from identifying Vincent at the food table. Let's take a quick breath here. This is a disaster. As far as rolls are concerned, there have been very many bad rolls, and that's great. As long as you're finding ways to make it continuously interesting, giving more information in spite of their characters failing. If failure creates fun or funny moments that the players are all laughing about, then perfect. But on the flip side, if everyone has their heads in their hands and they don't seem like they're having a good time, then it might be time to have the attack spring right now. We've had some tension build, we've had people reveal themselves in some way, and it wouldn't feel super duper rushed. And even if it did feel rushed, if the players are not about what's going on, I'd rather rush and get them back into fun land than trudge through. But let's say that the players are having fun and that you're having fun. Everyone's enjoying the ride. So then we continue forward. Now remember that the NPCs aren't static. Consider what each person might do and where they might go. Vincent got his food. He might think that Performer is making an awkward situation. So he might end up meeting up with Star Destroyer at the drinks. They could have a little chat. Maybe with Vincent so far away, this location could make the tension between Renford and Vincent subside for a second. Candace, the inside assassin, might have had enough of the Performer, could be looking for a chance to poison Bruce Bay's drink, or Bruce's drink, the mayor in sadness. this might leave William and Drew to their own devices, as it feels like she can't do anything to change William's mind. Harriet might have gone over to Renford's group, because that situation might look a little bit suspicious, as Renfriend and Genevieve have worked together to keep Renford from seeing Vincent. Now we've got a couple beats, and I think that's a pretty good place to stop for now. This is a pretty long video already. We've built tension on a low to moderate level right now. The characters learned some things, lost some things, and we're struggling along. In our next episode, we'll go through the lead up to the attack, and if we've got time, the attack itself. How my attackers are gonna bust through, and how I use the information obtained to inform the assailants. So, if you enjoy this, please like, subscribe so you don't miss part 3, and well, until next time, take care.